Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers won 104-98 to improve to 46-29 on the season. They are now just a game back of Denver for number 3 and 2.5 games back of Houston for number 2. So the 2 seed is very much in play with another game against Houston in 11 days and a big matchup coming up against the Warriors on Thursday. But a nice win for the Lakers. This is back-to-back wins against 2 teams that they could potentially see at some point in the playoffs. I think 2 rather convincing wins against those 2 teams, and I will touch on that a little bit more in the show. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to everybody in the chat. This was a huge win for the Lakers. So after the Chicago loss, which was, of course, a heartbreaker for the group, they could have gone in one direction or the other. And instead of spiraling, this group has come together, and they won a significant matchup in Memphis for the 4-5 matchup. And now they beat Houston, knocking them down, a loss in the win-loss column, but also putting themselves in position, if they can beat Houston next week, to win the season series and have the head-to-head tiebreaker, which would be considerable if these 2 teams end up tying with one another, which is a possibility. And I will get a little bit more into the actual matchup as to how the Lakers and Rockets match up, and why I am so confident in the Lakers' ability to beat the Rockets if they end up playing each other in the playoffs. But Buha's big picture tonight is the number 2 seed is still within grasp for the Lakers. And this was the game that they needed to win for that to be a reality. Had they lost this game and dropped to 30 losses, at that point, Houston would be 4 games ahead of them in the loss column. Houston would only have 26 at that point. So at that, with 7 games left, it would have been possible to catch Houston, especially if they won the next game next week. But like, realistically, they were getting to the point where, had they lost this game, you probably could have kissed the 2 seed goodbye. But with winning this game, and then depending on how the rest of this week goes, the 2 seed is still very much in play. And I think that is something that has to be talked about. It was a big talking point tonight with the group. JJ was asked about seeding and just what he's trying to focus on down the stretch here. And the big thing that he was preaching is urgency, and just this group starting to get into a playoff mentality, having playoff-like habits, which I think they displayed in tonight's win. But that was also something that Luka talked about, LeBron talked about. So it seems to be something that's clearly on the players' minds, which like makes sense. But sometimes players or coaches will try to downplay these things and say, oh, we're not paying attention to the standings, or we're just focused on ourselves, or this or that. And like, the Lakers tonight, really for the first time, were admitting, no, we're watching the standings. We're talking about it amongst the players. We're talking about it in our team meetings. We're talking about it in the coaches' meetings. And this is something on our mind. And it's not just about, like, the goal, of course, is to avoid the play-in and be in the top 6. But if they can be the 2 seed instead of the 6 seed, they obviously would take being the 2 seed. And after this stretch with Rui out and then LeBron out, and both of them out together, and then coming back and losing some of the games that they recently lost, like it was getting a bit shaky there. And it was looking like maybe the 4 seed was the best case scenario for this group. But with wins over Memphis and Houston, and then again, a big matchup with Golden State on Thursday, they can win that one. Then they play Friday against the Pelicans, who just shut down Zion Williamson and CJ McCollum. That should be a game that they should, probably a game they could even rest Luka or LeBron or something, just to get those guys a little bit of a break before the OKC games. Then they go to OKC, and we don't know what OKC is going to be doing because the gap between OKC and Cleveland has grown a little bit. And so maybe they only take one of those games seriously, even though we've seen with OKC when they rest some of their starters or stars, like they're still a formidable team. They could still beat almost anybody on any given night. So those will still be tough games, even if they end up not taking them as seriously in terms of like a personnel perspective. But right now, I think that the big thing for me is this game cracked open the door. It was still open, but however open it was, it's a little bit more open now. And I think that's remains a real possibility for the Lakers if they can. They don't have to run the table necessarily. Of course, if they run the table, that increases the odds notably. But if they can beat Golden State, they can maybe split the two OKC games. They can beat Dallas and beat Houston. Like, you know, at least lose maybe max like 2 games the rest of the season, but also be a little bit more strategic where it's not losing to Houston, not losing to Golden State, who's going to be right there behind them. It's looking like, you know, maybe Golden State or the Clippers or Timberwolves. Like Memphis is torpedoing down the West standings. I would not be surprised if they finish as like the 8th seed and are in the play-in mix. But for the Lakers' purposes, if they can win the Golden State game and the Houston game, I think those are the 2 most important remaining games aside from a healthy OKC matchup and just like that barometer, that measuring stick game. And then, of course, like the Luka game and the return and playing AD for the first time, Luka going back to Dallas. Like from an emotional perspective, that game is going to be highly charged, right? Like that's going to be a must-watch game. And just the scene of that evening, but like from an actual like Lakers record implications with the standings, this Golden State game on Thursday and Houston next week are the 2 big ones that if they can win those 2 and then go 3-2 in their other 5 games, they're in a pretty good spot, I think, to potentially get the 2 seed or maybe even, you know, the 3 seed. Right now it's looking like they're going to have the tiebreaker over Denver. So they're right there. And those are going to be the 2 games really to watch the rest of the way. Notable performers tonight. We have to start with Dorian Finney-Smith, which is not a place I anticipated starting, but 20 points tonight, which I believe is his Laker high, if I'm not mistaken. Hit 6 threes, was 6 for 11 on threes. 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 3 blocks. The 3 blocks really stood out. He did a nice job protecting the rim, and his rim protection numbers have been pretty good, despite being essentially 6'7", like maybe 6'8", and playing a lot of small ball 5. He manned the paint tonight and did a really impressive job battling Alperen Şengün and Steven Adams, and in a way kind of playing those guys off the floor where I believe they brought in Şengün around like the 3-something mark. But for a bulk of that 4th quarter, they were basically benching him because of the way the Lakers were attacking him with pick and pops and in pick and rolls and basically playing him off the floor. So I thought DFS to me, like, maybe I'll add the game ball segment, although I think more often than not it's going to go to Luka or LeBron. But like tonight, I would give the game ball to Dorian with the big shots he hit and the way he competed in the paint and allowed the Lakers to thrive while going small. And like there was a lineup that Houston threw out that was Steven Adams, Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, and I want to say Aben Thompson was the other one out there. And it was like basically 6'7" and above and 2 guys like near 7 feet. It's about as big of a lineup as you will realistically see in the NBA. And it did not matter. Like Dorian was in there like doing his thing. So I just think Dorian, it continues to just play out where like the Lakers, I think that trade changed the trajectory of their season. And if they win a championship or have a deep playoff run, Luka will be the headliner, and that trade and that changed the trajectory of the franchise long term and short term, but like Dorian Finney-Smith and the way that he impacted the Lakers locker room culture, their defensive culture, and just the versatility and almost being like the skeleton key to their small ball looks. Because I've mentioned this before, their small ball looks were not effective pre-DFS trade. Like, but when they went to LeBron or Rui or those two together, and Vando hadn't returned yet, like those lineups were not good. They were bleeding points earlier in the season. And the second DFS got there, that shifted that. Then they got Vando back, and that gave them even more optionality. Then they traded for Luka, and they really adopted that small ball, centerless style of play. So I think DFS, this was one of his best games as a Laker, and given the stakes, given the importance, like this is why the Lakers traded for DFS. Second guy I'm going to mention is Gabe, who had another impactful shooting night. He had 15 points in Memphis, had 20 points tonight, also hit 6 threes. He went 6 for 13, 4 rebounds. He was in there doing his thing. It helped that they had a small guard in Fred VanVleet for Gabe to match up with, and that made him, I think, a little bit more playable, like aside from obviously the shooting and I think being a weak side, like catch and shoot threat. But Gabe played really well tonight, and what was another guy who made a big impact off the bench. Like it was really him in DFS. Also worth mentioning with DFS, Lakers were plus 16 in his 32 minutes, which was a team best. No other Laker had a double digit plus minus. So DFS continues to be the plus minus darling of the team. Then, of course, we got to get into like Luka had 26 and 9, had 2 steals, and struggled a bit with his shot, just 6 for 16, 1 for 7 on threes. But I thought he was good defensively and really was orchestrating the offense. Like no other Laker had more than 4 assists. He had more than double any other Laker. And I thought he did a really good job of picking apart Houston's defense. And the Lakers did not have a good shooting night. Luka easily could have had like 15 assists tonight. So I thought he was pretty much Luka outside of a little bit of the shooting struggles. Austin, 12 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 of 11 shooting. Was not as involved offensively tonight as he was, of course, going back to like the Memphis game, but even more recently. And I will touch on a little bit more of that in one of my takeaways. LeBron, 16 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. He was awesome defensively tonight. Had the big block on Şengün late when the Lakers were up by 4. Houston's running a baseline out of bounds play. He reads it perfectly and just swats the shit out of it out of bounds. And that was just a trademark LeBron chase down block. And he was a big part as well with DFS and Rui and Vando of LA being able to play small and survive against a team that was, again, doing some double big looks as they have been more recently. And then they'll zone up a lot with Steven Adams in there. Otherwise, Rui had a big 3, and he struggled a bit from and some cuts and was not quite himself offensively. Jackson, like Şengün got some deep seals on him and scored over him, and he played one of his lower minute total games, only played 14 minutes tonight. And then Goodwin, Vando, and Dalton were all fringe rotation guys. So it really has become more of a 7-man rotation if we're looking at especially the Memphis game and this game. JJ's gone with the starters plus DFS and Gabe, and then the other guys are at like 12 minutes or less. So that seems to be the way that this rotation is trending. So it might end up being, we've talked about Goodwin versus Dalton and how deep JJ wants to go. It might just be like actually 7.5 instead of 9.5 or 9. So that's just something to monitor here down the stretch. And then stat of the night for me, I think it easily could be DFS's 3 blocks. It easily could be the 12 combined threes from DFS and Gabe. However, I'm going to point out that Houston only had 13 points in transition. And we know that one of the Achilles heels, if not the Achilles heel of this Lakers team and of this Lakers defense, is transition. It is all like, there have been stretches where it's been better this season, but really, if you could turn it into a bit of a track meet and you can attack these guys in transition. They go through stretches where they just don't want to get back, or they have trouble matching up or communicating or whatnot, or they just don't have the athletes. And like Houston obviously has the athletes, they have the length, they have the speed. That's a big advantage for them in this matchup with the Lakers. But tonight, it just like Lakers, I thought did a remarkable job getting back in transition and taking care of the ball. They only had 11 turnovers, so that is part of it. If you have, say, 17 turnovers, that's 6 more at a minimum, like opportunities for Houston in transition. And then once they get in that flow, that can lead to even more early offense opportunities. But I thought the Lakers did a really good job of taking care of the ball. They crashed the offensive glass. They had 10 offensive rebounds, and they really limited Houston's transition opportunities. And that, to me, is a key in this matchup and really a key for them moving forward. Of if they can, like 13 points is, I checked it, I think it was Houston's 23rd lowest total of the year, which like doesn't sound that impressive, but they played 76 games. So there were, that's in the bottom third of their transition, scoring totals this year. So like that's solid, right? Like it's not amazing, but it was solid. And that's all the Lakers needed tonight. I mean, Houston just dropped 148 points. They scored 98 points tonight. They'd won 13 of 14 games. They're on a 3-game winning streak. They're one of the hottest teams in the NBA, and the Lakers limited them, particularly in transition, where they're lethal, where like that's their advantage over basically the entire league. Like they are the most athletic team in the league, or in that conversation, that they got to be top 3 if they're not number 1. So I thought the Lakers did a really impressive job of limiting them in transition. Now on to takeaway number 1 for me, which is how these two teams match up. I thought this was an appropriate preview of what a playoff series could look like between these two teams. And as I've been talking about recently, when asked about how the Lakers match up with other teams in the West and like who would be the most optimal first round opponent, I think tonight, for me at least, confirmed that Houston has to be either at the top of the list or it's between Houston and Memphis, I think, really. Like that's factoring in Minnesota, Golden State, the Clippers have looked much better recently. Of course, Denver and OKC, I think are at the back of that list. But the Rockets' half-court offense is just a mess, and they have a roster construction problem where you could argue their 3 best or like most reliable scorers and shot creators are Şengün, Green, and Van Vliet. And especially in this matchup, but I think in general, those guys can all be picked on and all be targeted by opposing ball handlers and scorers. And we saw variations of that tonight where the Lakers, anytime they could post up Fred Van Vliet, they either got a good look with the ball handler, or they forced the double and then were able to either make the weak side pass, the skip pass, or able to ping it around the perimeter and then get a corner 3 or attack a closeout or something, or Alperen Şengün in pick and rolls, either attacking him off the dribble, and then sometimes they had to help, and that led to kick out passes, or again, those skip passes and weak side reversals, or just pick and pop. And we saw with Rui, we saw with DFS, that's been something the Lakers have been trying to do a little bit more recently, is picking and popping in those smaller looks and just making that big man have to cover a lot of ground defensively, which Şengün, I think, holds up better than people think. I think he holds up better than like a guy like Sabonis, who he's often compared to, but there still is a limitation there in terms of foot speed, in terms of ability to cover ground. And I think both on drives and on covering ground to rotate out to the popping shooter, there's some limitations there. And then Jalen Green didn't play at crunch time. He played that like one possession, one offensive possession when they were trying to score, and that was when Şengün got blocked. But like Jalen Green basically got benched down the stretch in this game as they went with Tari Eason and Jabari Smith. So they have like a bit of an issue here where their best offensive players have defensive limitations and can be picked on, and the Lakers successfully picked on them. And the Lakers didn't have the offensive performance like they had in Memphis, but they still got a bunch of good looks. And I don't know their shot quality off of this game, but I would love to see it. I'm sure it was very high. So I think that's the biggest thing to me that stands out is like just their offensive advantages against Houston's defense. Now, of course, Houston's a really good defense, and there's a reason why I mentioned those three guys, because the other guys, Dylan Brooks, Amen Thompson, Smith, Steven Adams is a beast. Like they play more zone with him, but he's still a big body. And Eason, more so Brooks, Thompson, Smith, and Eason, like those guys are all four really good perimeter defenders who can switch across multiple positions. They're effective as help guys. They're really effective at scrambling, scram switching. So basically, they would do some pre-switching where when the Lakers would try to target a Şengün or a Van Vliet, they would switch like right before that player was being called into the action, and that takes both awareness, but also a certain level of athleticism and quickness to execute that effectively before that player is called in. So they have some high-end defensive talent, but it is a mix of really good high-end defenders and length and athleticism with some guys with some real limitations there. And I think that mix against an offense like the Lakers, where they thrive on pick and rolls and post-ups and targeting your weaker defenders, if you're giving them 2 to 3 guys, especially in that starting lineup, like the Lakers are going to exploit that. And I thought they did a really good job of that. And they could do an even better job. And I think they will do a better job in the next matchup next week. The second thing here, and I'm sure you guys noticed this too, way too much Dylan Brooks. Like it's the gift and the curse with Dylan Brooks. And it's not like the antics. Like the antics are what they are. It's part of his brand, I guess. Like you know, it makes him a villain and an annoying player to play against. But similar to a Pat Bev or like a Marcus Smart, like that just comes with who Dylan Brooks is, right? So we understand that you're going to get that when you play Dylan Brooks. And I actually thought defensively, had a steal, had a block, like was guarding LeBron and had some nice possessions against LeBron, was guarding Luka, had some nice possessions against Luka. He obviously fouls a lot. It doesn't always get called. I think he only had 2 fouls tonight. So, I think he probably should have had double-digit fouls, but like whatever. It was like a playoff-like game from a reffing perspective. However, and I know he's having a good shooting season, but he's just one of those guys that like I just do not trust offensively. I do not trust in terms of his offensive basketball IQ and like what's a good shot and what's a bad shot. And basically, unless it's like a swing pass for an open corner or wing 3, I think it's a win for the Lakers defense anytime Dylan Brooks is doing something. And a lot of times it's like wild drives or like these pull-up mid-range jumpers. Like it looks like he thinks he's a star offensively, which was also how he played in Memphis. And there are nights where it works and those shots go down, but he's largely been an inconsistent scorer and shooter and more of a volume guy than an efficiency guy. And I thought there were times tonight he just hijacked their offense, and especially in the first quarter. And that was part of the reason why, like, it's almost like turnovers out there where like when Dylan Brooks gets the ball and he's shooting, it's a win for the Lakers. It's a win for the opposing defense. So, and because he's so good defensively and a leader on this team, they always are closing with him and playing him big minutes. But like, I felt tonight, once it was clear that his shot, he had a stretch there, like kind of in the middle quarters where he hit a few in a row. But outside of that, if I was Ime Udoka and coaching Houston, like I think I probably would have leaned more into closing with Smith, Eason, Thompson, Şengün, and then you have to pick between Green and Van Vliet, and you are giving up a bit defensively, but I like the offense a bit more with that combination. And if you go green, you could do a lot of switching, like 1 through 4, and then you got some limitations there with Şengün. But I mean, again, anytime Dylan Brooks is involved, that is a win for the Lakers defense. And he was very involved. He was tied for the team leader in shot attempts tonight and did score 16. But they were -8 in his 36 minutes. And like, I just thought that the Lakers were winning those minutes because of some of the shots he was taking. And I think other couple like smaller things were just, I thought the Lakers started to look more comfortable against Houston's zone, although it did disrupt them a bit at times. I don't like, this is why when I've talked about Houston, I've talked about their late game offense, and I just did not like the shots that they were generating. And of course, the Lakers deserve credit for their defense as well, but like, I don't think Houston has a clear identity late in games, right? And you know, maybe it's playing more through Şengün, but again, he wasn't out there until like the last 3.5 minutes, and then I thought the Lakers did a good job with doubling and swarming him, and then rotating out. Like they've really mastered that type of defense, and that kind of plays into their strength. So I think this is a really good matchup for the Lakers. I think tonight, I already thought that going into tonight. I think tonight further confirmed that, and I think similar to the Denver game, the Lakers the Luka game, the Luka breakout game. I thought the Lakers generated a lot of good looks, and if they shoot closer to their capabilities, they missed a bunch of 2-pointers. Like LeBron, Luka, they missed a bunch of shots that they, like Rui, like a bunch of shots they normally make. They make those at an average rate. I think they win this game convincingly. So I came away from this game very optimistic about how the Lakers match up with the Rockets. As of now, I'd probably pick the Lakers in 5. Say Houston gets one of the games in Houston, and that's about it. Regardless of course, if it's home court, that makes a little bit of a difference. But I still think even without home court, that they probably find a way to win it in 5. Takeaway number 2 for me is going to be the defensive playoff blueprint against the Lakers, and this being a reference point. So what I mean by that is JJ constantly references reference points with his group as in terms of like different things that happen within games that or the totality of a game that he will reference later on as like remember when this happened, remember how he handled this. And he kind of has an ongoing list of reference points that he likes to bring up with the group. And I think tonight showed, especially coming off of the game that they just had against Memphis, where I think Austin had 16 shots, Luka had 18, and LeBron had 21. Tonight, LeBron had 12. So that was 9 fewer shot attempts. Austin had 11. That's 5 fewer shot attempts. Luka had 16, so he was pretty close, but still 2 fewer shot attempts. So collectively, with some quick math, that is 16 fewer shot attempts combined for the Lakers' big 3. And where did those shots go? They went to Dorian Finney-Smith and Gabe Vincent, and to a lesser extent, Rui Hachimura. But Gabe shot 14 times, 13 threes. DFS shot 13 times, 11 threes. And we saw Houston really sell out with blitzing and trapping and swarming the paint and really packing the paint and making a point of emphasis of Luka, you're not going to beat us. Austin, you're not going to beat us. LeBron, you're not going to beat us. And that strategy combined with their primary defensive talent that they could put on those guys of Brooks, of Thompson, of Smith, of Eason, they can be effective with that. And I thought there were certainly times where the Lakers offense was a bit like just go back and look at the first quarter. They barely got to 16 points. It was a rock fight. However, I think the Lakers looked much more comfortable progressively throughout the game. 32 points in the second quarter, 34 in the third, and then it turned into a rock fight again. Both teams were like, this was a playoff-like game, and both teams, fourth quarter, legs were heavy, guys were depleted, and it was just like jump shots were not falling. But I think tonight showed how teams are probably going to try to guard the Lakers. If you can be switch heavy and also be aggressive with your coverages. And it is going to come down to some extent with Luka, LeBron, and Austin being selfless players and being really good playmakers and passers. There's an element of just like, are the role players making shots? And tonight they did. We've also seen games where they haven't. And that, like, those games might be games the Lakers lose or just games that are a bit closer than what they could be. But I think tonight is going to be a reference point moving forward as to like how playoff defenses guard the Lakers. And again, I think they did a lot of smart things with the positioning, Gabe in the corner, DFS as a pick and pop threat or a weak side wing threat. And just, I think you're starting to see the group process at a bit of a higher level in terms of their 4-on-3 or 3-on-2 advantages or guys relocating along the arc. Like there's all these subtle improvements within the Lakers offense that I think this game, of course, was not a like good offensive performance in terms of results. But I think from a process perspective, a lot of threes, a lot of open threes, low turnovers. Like I think they took care of the ball and they generated a lot of good looks. Really, the only thing, like 20 free throws for this group is low. However, I think based on how the game was ref, that was partly it. Just it was a physical, tough playoff-like game on both sides of the ball. And then takeaway number 3 for me, just to go back into the rotation a little bit, because I think we continue to learn a little bit about the rotation. JJ was asked about Jackson pregame, and it was interesting because he was asked one tell with JJ or one interesting thing I've noticed with when he answers questions is like he will tell you exactly what he thinks, and he might package it in a certain way because he is so media trained and he is so well-spoken and charismatic. And like, obviously he's good in front of a mic, but he like can't lie. Like it's almost like liar. Like he just can't lie. So he got asked the question about Jackson. And I've noticed this will sometimes happen where like he gets asked a bit of like a leading question that's like a positive question about a player, and then he kind of starts it positively, and then he starts going into like his real feelings about the player or like how he's currently feeling about the player. So one thing with Jackson was he was like, he's really important to us and like we really need him, and I don't want to put that pressure on him. Like it's not supposed to be a pressure thing, but he's like we need him, and he needs to stay out of foul trouble and stop complaining to the refs. And like, if he does those two things, and he did say like he has been doing those things, like then everything's good. And tonight he only had, he had 2 fouls in 14 minutes. So like, I guess if he had played into like mid to high 20s, maybe he gets like 4 or 5. He wasn't really in foul trouble, but tonight he only played 14 minutes. And we've seen that in some of these more recent games, JJ's had a pretty short leash with Jackson defensively. And tonight they were loading up the paint, taking away his lobs. I think Luka had that like one lob pass that Jackson caught, but it wasn't dunkable, so he came down with it. And so Houston, I thought, had a good game plan there, and teams have been loading up and shifting with the low man against Jackson and really trying to take that away. But clearly, like JJ, like similar, like Darvin had his things, right, where he would go to the 3-guard lineup and he had certain guys he preferred and certain combinations he preferred closing with or playing more. I think we're seeing with JJ, it's like this group is probably going to play just a lot of centerless, like small ball, and there will be matchups where Jackson plays more. But as we are seeing, like in theory, Memphis and Houston are more Jackson matchups just because of the collective front court size and the length and the athleticism. And like in theory, you would play Jackson more in these matchups. And I think it's now 18 minutes and 14 minutes the last 2 games. So he's averaged 16 combined minutes over these past couple games, and the Lakers have won. So it's hard to quibble with the results, but it is just something to monitor in terms of the way that when he's not as impactful offensively, I think there's more of a magnifying glass on his defense. And I also think with the refs a little bit, like he has been chirping more in general. And there's been, I feel like 1 to 2 times a game, there's a sequence where I'm like surprised he doesn't get a tech with the way that he's like going at a ref. And sometimes it's like up and down the floor, like, you know, for multiple possessions. And he's just yelling at a ref, berating them, and doesn't get a tech. So that's been something that I think like the team has been on him about in terms of like just next play, forget about it, move on. And so that's the thing. And then as I mentioned a bit earlier, like really seems like it's just the 5 starters plus DFS and Gabe. Probably Vando is like the 8th man, but it's been pretty bunched up with Goodwin and Vando have been pretty close in terms of minutes. And then Dalton continues to play his 1 shift. Tonight it was even shorter. He didn't even get to 5 minutes. He got to 4. So those are a few random notes with the rotation that I've been picking up on over the last few games. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. First one from Diego Cardona. Thank you for the super chat. The fourth quarter of this game is why every team wants Houston in the first round. Braun has more experience in his pinky finger than the entire Rockets team. It's a really good point. Like Fred VanVleet, to his credit, has won a championship, and he has been on in multiple deep or you know, at least out of the first round playoff runs. So that like he's the exception. Steven Adams with OKC and even with Memphis has been out of the first round. I believe he hasn't been to a finals off the top of my head, but he's been to, I think he's been to a couple of conference finals. And then Dylan Brooks has been out of the first round once, I believe, I want to say. So they have a few guys who have some experience, but when we're looking at Şengün, Green, Thompson, Smith, Eason, those guys don't have playoff experience. And that, I think, is why you could argue Houston is the most appealing matchup for the Lakers. For me, it's close between Houston and Memphis because I mean, I don't know. I think Memphis has guys you can target defensively as well. They have, I don't think they have the caliber of perimeter defenders that Houston has. They have better interior defenders, and I think you saw that with Edey and Triple J. It changed the way the Lakers attacked them inside, and it was a little bit harder to get to the rim. To like Edey had a bunch of blocks, and like Triple J, and like they're just better at protecting the rim. Houston, they have all these wings, but they have 2 weak points in VanVleet and Şengün that you can attack. And like when you have a small point guard that can be targeted, and like VanVleet's not even like a bad defender. Like he holds up well for his size. It's just that similar to like when bigger wings have targeted Gabe, there's just a size element that you can't like rep. Like if Kevin Durant is targeted Gabe, he's got 8 or 9 inches on him, and he can just turn to shoot over him. There's nothing Gabe can do about it, right? Like if anything, Gabe is probably stronger than Kevin Durant, but it doesn't matter because Kevin Durant's like at some point, like basketball is a size game, right? It's the basket's 10 feet, and guys who are taller have an easier time. So I think Houston having Şengün and VanVleet allows for entry points into their defense. And then that's to say nothing of the offense, which again, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're running. It does not seem like just some of the passes and Lakers did a good job playing the passing lanes tonight. They had 11 steals, but part of that too was like some questionable decisions made on Houston's part. But you're 100% right. This is why, like, I think if you are pulling the other 7 West playoff teams, I think Houston would probably be the team that everyone wants to play. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. The Lakers look tired. Rui was like 30%, AR 50%, Luka and Braun 70%, and somehow, some way won. Thank you, DFS and Gabe. Those two look their best since being a Laker. Now they can get a full 72 hours of rest and be ready. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to look for the concern or I guess the worry coming out of this game, it is like this group does look tired. I think they've done a good job of mustering the requisite level of energy to beat Memphis and to beat Houston. And that was not something that, like, they weren't able to sustain that against Chicago, and they barely got there against Indiana. So like, I think really the only thing to nitpick is like they have looked tired for a while, but they're having a much needed break for the next 48 hours. They're going to practice on Wednesday, which I think will be very beneficial, especially with Golden State coming up and the way that they run their offense, the way that you have to game plan for Steph, and now even throwing in the Jimmy wrinkle. Like, I think that's going to be very valuable for the Lakers to have that practice time to prepare for that game, because again, I think that's a really big game. If they can beat Golden State, that creates some separation there, because I think Golden State right now is the biggest threat to probably be the 5 seed, and just by nature of where the Lakers are in the standings, like if they're potentially the 5 seed, that makes them a threat for the 4 seed. And if the Lakers aren't careful, like if they lose to Golden State, and then I think they're going to beat New Orleans, but like if they lose to Golden State and like split OKC and go 2-2 over the next 4 games, then you're in like kind of troubled waters with how much Golden State's been winning. And at that point, you're potentially, maybe you drop to 5 instead of going up to 3 or going up to 2. So it's a really big game, and I think it's going to be good for them to get some rest and prepare for it with a practice on Wednesday. So yeah, I think that's the biggest upside to them having a couple days off. Jeremiah, thank you for the super chat. Top 5 Lakers jerseys besides the Kobe one from 2020. Oh, like my favorite, I would have to say, first one that comes to mind is the blue and gold Minneapolis jerseys. Either the white one or the baby blue, but I think the baby blue one is classic. And I think back to when Kobe and Shaq wore that jersey, but that one's up there for me. I mean, I would say the Showtime home yellow or gold jerseys would be another one for me. I would say the Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain era purple ones in that time. So that would be 3. I feel like I'm forgetting, definitely not the like banana yellow Laker ones. The purple ones have grown on me. I didn't really like the black panel on the side at first, but that has grown on me. I think the blue and baby blue Jerry what like the throwback ones that Kobe wore as well. I think those are up there. Then I feel like that there's got to be, I'm trying to remember some of the, definitely not this year's City Edition. I'm trying to remember some of the ones off the top of my head. I mean, last year's City Editions grew on me. The one, but I'm not gonna pick those. I don't know. Let me see what you guys are saying in the chat. Mamba jersey. So the Mamba jersey is the one he's talking about here. The Kobe one from 2020. That is the Mamba jersey. So Art of War. I like the 90s purple jersey and gold. Yeah, the 90s ones. Now that I'm thinking about, yeah, I would say like both of those. Like, yeah, I mean, I certainly a more nostalgia, like from mid 2000s and beyond. I liked most of those. All right, back into the super chats. Braden, thank you for the super chat. The streets are calling him Gabe the Babe. Vincent, after tonight, him and Doe were awesome tonight. Brate, is Luca's arm okay? Luca was icing it during post game. Then in the locker room after, he was getting it taped up by his personal trainer. So he said he'll be okay. And he said he was in a lot of pain, but he'll be okay and be fine in a couple days. So I'll take him at his word and assume he'll be okay. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he's a limited participant in practice, but I think a lot of the Lakers' value will be more so just getting on the court and walking through sets and game plan and organizing the offense and like just fine tuning stuff. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. Do you really think we have a shot against OKC? They have the largest point differential currently in NBA history, plus 13. Numbers don't lie. I believe they're tied with the 96 Bulls, if I'm not mistaken, but they're right there. Yeah, I mean, they're having a historic season. And I mean, I've been, for those who've been listening for a while, you know, I've been giving OKC their respect and saying still to this day, I consider them the best team in the West, the favorites in the West. And they would be my pick to go to the finals, as of right now. I would like to see how the teams match up. The last time they played was, this is wild, but the last time they played was around Thanksgiving. So just think about all of the changes that the Lakers have undergone since Thanksgiving in terms of trading for DFS, trading for Luka, changing their style of defense, changing their offense. JJ, I think, growing into his own with his coaching and his game plans and strategy and whatnot. LeBron, I think, has been like coming off the injury, has been more up and down, but like in general, from that point on, I think that was before LeBron really like hit his stride this season and took it to an all NBA level. And like, I think right before the injury, he was being talked about as maybe like a back end MVP ballot, back end first team all NBA guy. And now that has since quieted down because he missed time and has not looked quite himself yet since coming back, at least offensively. I think the finishing has not been back, but like that's just so long ago. I mean, that's basically 4 months. So the Lakers are a different team. OKC is a different team. They have Chet now and they've had their reps as a group and have just steamrolled everybody. So I think the Lakers have a chance, and the biggest reason I think the Lakers have a chance is for the reason I think they're gonna have a chance against most teams, if not all teams, and have a real shot to win a championship. It's because they step onto the floor with two of the three best players in basically any series, and there are going to be series like against Houston, like against Memphis, and potentially even the Clippers, where they have the two best players on the floor. And that is such an advantage in the playoffs when the rotation shrinks, the minutes increase, and if you're getting 43 minutes from Luka and 42 minutes from LeBron and 41 minutes from Austin, that is just so much firepower and shot creation and playmaking and production offensively, to say nothing of what each of those guys has done defensively. And I just think it's just at a different level than basically almost any other team in terms of their top three. Now, players 4 through 7, 4 through 8 are going to matter, and that is where I give OKC an advantage. but I would not be surprised or shocked if the Lakers role players outplayed their role players, in part because their role players have playoff experience and more notable playoff experience. DFS has been to the conference finals. He has been in, he's played series where he's had to guard a Kawhi Leonard, a Paul George. He was not on the finals team, obviously, so he wasn't with Dallas last year. Luka has been to the finals, been to the conference finals. Gabe has been to the finals. Rui's been to the conference finals. Vando's been to the conference finals. Austin has been to the conference finals. LeBron has been, he has a residency in the finals, seemingly. So that playoff experience compared to OKC and a lot of their guys, their playoff experience was going to the second round last year. Like, it's different. So on paper, I would give LA the top end talent advantage and OKC the like middle to back end of the rotation advantage, with guys like Hartenstein and Dort and Caruso. And like, I think that's a little bit of a higher caliber than like the middle portion of the Lakers roster. But again, I would not be surprised if DFS and Gabe and Rui can outplay those guys, right? So I think the Lakers have a chance. I would like to see, again, like we can always theorize these things. We can simulate it like a game, like 2K, right? But when we actually have the data points and the reference points of the actual game and seeing how the teams match up and seeing where the advantages are and where the weaknesses are, that's where I think we can have a better idea of how the Lakers truly match up with them. So I'll have a better answer for you next week. But tentatively, I do give the Lakers a real shot. And I think even now, I'd if I was picking OKC, it would probably be in 6 or 7 games. It's not like they would sweep or in my opinion, like steamroll the Lakers. Like I think it's going to be a competitive series. I just think OKC is going to have home court. They've been dominant all season. And I know people like to play it's the regular season. That's cute, this and that. But like if they win 68 games, like you don't casually win 68 games. Like that is a number that is like up there with the best teams of all time, to say nothing of, as you're talking about, net rating, point differential, all that stuff. So I don't want to discount them, but I think the Lakers have Luka and LeBron, and that gives them a real shot against anybody, I think, including OKC. Steve Stevenson, thank you for the super chat. How much do you project we get in the playoffs, given our roster is stacked with playoff risers? How much better do you project we get in the playoff? A lot better. And that's why, again, as things stand, the only team I would pick ahead of the Lakers or pick over the Lakers in a 7-game series in the West is OKC. Everyone else, I would pick the Lakers. And I think like Memphis and Houston, I think those are probably 5-game series with or without home court. Maybe without home court, it gets stretched to 6, but I'd probably still pick them in 5 tentatively. And then Golden State, Clippers, Timberwolves, I think there's some matchup things there, some top end talent things there where like those series could be a little bit more competitive, maybe 6-game series. I forget if I think that's 5. And then Denver's a tricky one because I feel like we've only seen one true game of both sides at full strength, and the Lakers did win that one handedly. So I think that makes like that's ultimately why I lean Lakers, but I think that could be a 6 or 7-game series. So yeah, I mean, I think the Lakers have like it really starts at the top. I think LeBron, Luka, and Austin, if you look at it, have all been better in the playoffs than in the regular season historically. And I know LeBron, 2023, he was not right physically. He was dealing with the foot situation. He rushed it to come back. So some of his numbers were a little bit lower, but they still made the conference finals with him in that state. And he still had plenty of big games and big performances and was a driving force behind that. So even with like a physically compromised LeBron, you see the Lakers can find ways to win series and go to the conference finals. So I'm very bullish on this group. And then, like Gabe has had an impressive playoff run with Miami. Rui's had some impressive series. I think there's some questions with Vando, of course. I got there's some less proven guys, Goodwin, Dalton, depending on if those guys are even in the rotation. Jackson is maybe the biggest wild card just because he has never really been in a playoff rotation, and let alone like as a starting setter. So there's some questions there, but for the most part, that they have guy like their top. I didn't mention DFS, who's also been a playoff riser. So like, I think their closing lineup, that they're probably like 5 most prominent players, have all been on deep playoff runs, like had playoff success. And I think that is something that is encouraging about the Lakers in the playoffs. So yeah, I think that's again why, depending on the bracket, like I would tentatively pencil them into the conference finals, especially if they can get out of the 4-5. Bang Charlie, thank you for the super chat. Yo, Jovan, so glad we can do my podcast after 2 big Lakers wins and not 2 close losses. Got a lot of people already waiting on the live stream. Can we figure out the deets by Instagram after the stream? Late night gang for the win. Yeah, we can. And I saw you had messaged me, so I got to check that. Appreciate you. Hey, Shinani, next few games are key. Golden State, Clippers, and Minnesota, all only 2 to 3 games behind. Try to push to win the next few games and then rest once we have a top 6 seed locked in. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think the Lakers are going to be in a position to rest this regular season. Like, I could be wrong, but I think every game is going to matter down the stretch because, again, either way you look at it, they're 2.5 within Houston, 1 behind Denver, and then on the flip side, they're 1 ahead of Memphis, 2 ahead of Memphis, 2.5 ahead of Golden State, 3. My contacts are fuzzy right now. 3 ahead of Minnesota, 3 ahead of the Clippers. So like, that's enough of a gap where I guess if they win like their next 4, they might have secured at least a top 6 spot. But it's not a big enough gap yet to consider like resting guys. Like I think maybe the Portland game, depending on where they're at, they can rest guys and try to get a little bit of a benefit. But also with the play-in tournament, if you avoid it, you get almost a week of rest between the final regular season game and the first playoff game, because it ends in the weekend, and then you don't play in the playoffs until the following weekend. So you get like a week off. So you're going to get rest either way. So I think I think it's too close where they're going to have to play all 7 games seriously down the stretch. And like that Portland game might determine, I mean, it could have a huge impact in terms of like they could be the 2 seed if they win, or like the 5 seed if they lose. Like there could be a wide margin there depending on like where exactly they're at and how many teams are tied and like all that stuff. So I think they're gonna have to go hard the rest of the way. Eeg, thank you for the super chat. Is Rui on a minutes restriction? Avoiding OKC to Western Conference Finals, I think, should be prioritized. I wouldn't hate the 6 for this reason. Can't risk 7 though. I think Rui is still on a bit of a minutes restriction, but it seems to be increasing. Like we haven't talked to JJ about it in a few games, but like just looking at his minutes, I would assume so, because he's relatively consistently been under 30, but in the high 20s. And we know when healthy pre-injury, he was a guy who was in the low 30s to even sometimes mid to high 30s. So, I mean, he played 31 minutes tonight. So I think it's getting more in line with his normal minutes. I also think like DFS had a better game than him tonight. So I think that would partly be why DFS played more than him. And even then he only played like 1 minute more than him. So it was pretty close there. But yeah, I think they've been progressively ramping him up, and they said they wanted to be cautious with him. And remember, even he said he was going to be 70 to 80% basically for the foreseeable future. And I think he's looking more like himself, but he hasn't been quite, I think, back to the pre-injury version of himself on either end of the floor. We did see he punished early in the game. He punished Fred VanVleet on that free throw line jumper and that was something nice. Like we haven't seen as many post ups and kind of like the in between game with Rui recently, but I think he's still working his way back. What would be my read on the situation is that Jan, thank you for the super chat. 7 games left. Can we get to 50 wins? Lakers at 46. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the Lakers. I think they're probably going to go like my guess on the record would probably be 5-2 over the final 7, and that gets you to 51. So, but I think 4-3 is probably the worst case scenario, and that gets you to 50. So, yeah, I think they're going to hit 50. Nico Harrison's a burner. Thank you for the super chat and the creative name. JJ sees everything on Twitter plus this pod. True or false? I don't know. He claims he's not on Twitter, but I do think, I don't know if he's on Lakers Reddit or what, but he's aware of the discourse. JJ he's plugged in, so I think he's aware of certain things. I don't know if he listens to this pod. I know the team listens to the pod, so I think they're trying to get out ahead of anything I potentially say. So I know they listen, but I don't know if he does. But if so, what's up, JJ? Jerry Soriano, your lender for life. Thank you for the super chat. Rest players, we still haven't learned our lesson. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to rest players. I think the one thing that you can maybe do, especially with I think LeBron is the strongest candidate for this, is like you probably can rest LeBron in the New Orleans game. And I just think I understand the counterpoint to resting guys, but I also just look at it as like the dude is 40. He has had a couple of times in recent games where it's looked like he's re-aggravated the groin injury. He was already dealing with a foot thing. Like I don't think you want to overtax or overexert LeBron going into the playoffs. I think like he's the lone exception where he is so important to this group with his versatility on both sides of the ball, the ability to defend any position. I think one thing we've seen that we'll probably see a lot is LeBron on point guards, and then that allows the Lakers to, or the primary ball handler. We saw it against Denver. We saw it. We've seen it. We saw it a bit against Chicago. Like, but we've seen it at different points where they'll put him on the point guard or the lead ball handler, and that allows them to switch those 1-5, 2-5, whatever it is, pick and rolls, and then he just switches onto the big. So he's played center, he's played point guard, he's played wing, he's played everything in between, and then offensively is really valuable as just being him. But like, especially now as they're trying to figure out the offense, I think his screening and cutting and just his ability to do so many different things offensively that Luka and Austin can't even do or can't do to the same level as him. Like, the Lakers need him. I mean, I'm not saying anything crazy here, but like, I think that's the one guy that if you have to be careful with the minutes or the workload with LeBron, I think that's the one guy you really need to prioritize it with, because the alternative is like, if he tweaks that groin again, or he's not quite himself going into the playoffs, I just think he's so important to what the Lakers do, that he's a guy that, especially if you could give him one off night on a back-to-back against New Orleans, where like you might be able to beat them without Luka and LeBron and just lean in Austin. Like, I think that might be a spot to pick, but we'll see. You got to be careful, of course. Like, you don't want to overdo it. Eeg, thank you for the super chat. Do you know how to check percentage of shots that are blocked? Can't find. Vando seems to have half his attempts at the rim. Brutally stuffed, hard to watch. It's on Basketball Reference. If you go, it's not going to be updated off of tonight, but there is a column that's percent, or that's blocked. So it says Vando has had 9 shots blocked this year, which feels low. And he's attempted He's attempted 95. So, I mean, that is almost like 1 out of every 10 shots is blocked, according to Basketball Reference, which is a relatively high figure. So that checks out. Christian, thank you for the super chat. You think JJ has heard the LeBron songs? Have you heard them? They are bangers, LOL. Yes, I have heard them, and I'm glad LeBron was asked about it tonight. I was actually planning on asking about it, but I kind of got boxed out in the scrum, and it was like a little bit too far from it. So, but Melissa Rowland of Fox Sports asked it, and I think it was fun to see LeBron's reaction. I would assume JJ is maybe aware of it, just because, again, I think JJ is pretty plugged in, but I don't know if he's actually heard it. It's primarily been a TikTok thing. I think it's progressively spread more to like Instagram Reels and X and YouTube Shorts, but like the genesis has been TikTok, and I don't think JJ is a big TikTok guy. I'll say so. But yeah, they are bangers. They're awesome. Tali Khalifa, what up? Thank you for the super chat. How do we stack up against OKC? Is there a chance? Yeah, so I touched on this question a little bit earlier, but I think the Lakers have a real chance. I think the other thing I didn't mention is similar to Houston. Like I think the teams that are going to give the Lakers the biggest problems, in my opinion, are teams that switch a lot and don't really have defensive liabilities and have a measure of rim protection. And there are very few teams that check those boxes. OKC gets close, but I think ultimately for as great, and I use the word great here because I think they are great, for as great as Lou Dort and Alex Caruso are, they still are giving up a certain level of size and weight and strength to Luka and LeBron. And I know Dort did a solid to good job against Luka last year in the conference semifinals, but he can't guard both of them. And again, like maybe, this is where I like to see it. Like maybe those guys can be super disruptive and effective against those guys, but like I just think on some level that they're just kind of too small, and maybe they throw Chet on LeBron or Hartenstein and see how that looks. Like we have seen teams start to guard LeBron a little bit more with their centers. Maybe they try J-Dub on Luka and put a bigger body on him, but like that obviously has that there's always a unintended consequence, and then those guys, maybe their legs aren't quite there, and OKC is going to need them to score offensively to keep up with the Lakers and their offense. So if you have Chet and J-Dub doing all this defensively, they do have other guys that can score. So like maybe they find the offense elsewhere, but ideally, if you're OKC, like I think you're going to want those guys to be pretty involved offensively, and it is taxing to be like, well, we're going to be guarding Luka and LeBron for 40 minutes a night, and then also carrying a certain load offensively. So I think that the Lakers have some offensive advantages that, and also like they're not really going to be hiding. Like they're going to have to put, like Shea's going to have to guard probably Austin, I would assume, or he's going to have to guard Rui, which the Lakers will probably spam that and try to get post ups. And I'm sure OKC would prefer that on some level, but like that's going to be physically taxing for Shea. So I think the Lakers have a chance. Now, not having home court is not great for a team that's been dominant and played well at home, but like, it just is what it is. They're going to have to win that series on the road. So I like to see what it looks like over the weekend, though. Tom, thank you for the super chat. Man on the Lakers by Talented Blake. That's the best one. I agree. That is. Great W today. Got back from US to Europe. It's crazy how hard it is to watch LAL in Cali. Oh, got back from US to Europe. I'm interested. Like, I guess if you don't have Spectrum, I think it's hard. Or if you don't have League Pass, I mean, those are really the two primary ways. There are illegal streams, which I may or may not use to watch certain sporting events. So if you wanted to search Stream East, that's maybe a site you could use to watch games, but you didn't hear it from me. Philip passes Jovan pullover with a cop emoji. Glenn S. Jovan, are Koloko or Trey going to make the playoff roster? My read would be only one of them, and my understanding is the Lakers are still evaluating that. So I do think on some level it is a bit telling that neither one has really played recently, as the team has become healthier and more closer to like playoff form. But I still would convert one over Len, because I think in a disaster scenario in which like Jackson gets injured and Vando fouls out, if I have to throw in a big, I would much prefer Koloko or Jemison than Len. Like I think I'd prefer Keefe over Len. And I think I'd actually rather just go like just stay small for like the rest of the game or the rest of the series or the rest of the playoffs than go to Len. So I don't see any scenario in which I would feel comfortable playing Alex Len. So with that context or whatnot, like I just would prefer Koloko or Jemison. And then between the two, I've been more on the Koloko side. I think the other thing working in his favor is that Jemison's under contract. Has another year as a two-way guy, where Koloko does not. So if the Lakers don't convert Koloko, he could be a free agent. He could sign elsewhere as a two-way guy. He could sign elsewhere just a regular contract. Whereas Trey Jemison is under contract, and that's locked up. So if you really think, of course, like when it comes down to it, it's about who you think's the better player. And if you think it's Jemison and he could help more, then you prioritize that and say like, screw next year's two-way contract. But like I think ideally their goal would be to convert one and then have another one as a two-way for next year. And if you don't convert Koloko, there's a little bit of risk there of another team coming and snatching him. Whereas if you convert Koloko and don't convert Jemison, you still have Jemison for next year and can keep him in the program and whatnot. So that's like really the only thing there. But my understanding is it's going to come down to the wire, and it's something that they're evaluating through the rest of the regular season. Jake from State Farm says VPN if you have League Pass. That's another thing. But listen, I didn't say that. A couple of other things before I am going to wrap in about 5 to 10 minutes. I will keep a rage because we know I tend to go a bit longer. But a couple exciting things. One, I officially heard from the NBA today. I do have a vote this year. I had a vote for All-Star, so I assumed I would have a vote for the end of the season. But that's the second time I've had a ballot, and I'm going to be one of the 100 voters for MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, first team, or like the All NBA teams, all defensive teams, all rookie teams, Rookie of the Year, all that stuff. So I'm very excited about that, and excited to really have a general like idea of who I want to vote for, but really going to lock in here over the final couple weeks in terms of watching games, research, numbers, all that stuff, talking to people to kind of get their perspectives and I take it very seriously. It's a privilege to be a voter. So that's something that's really cool. And then got to give a quick shout out to the GOAT of NBA coverage right now. Zach Lowe is back at the Ringer, and no more Low Post. It is now the Zach Lowe Show. But as I've talked about, Zach has been a huge influence on me and my career, and someone I've wanted to be like and aspire to and emulate. And we missed him all season, and it's awesome that he's back. Telly Khalifa says you should drop a video into your process of voting and who you choose. It's a good idea. I've thought about that. The one thing with the voting is like I don't I feel like it is one of those things where like there's no right answer, right? So like no matter what, I don't even think like, I mean, I don't know, maybe I don't know if any of the awards have like a clear consensus choice. Maybe there's consensus choices, but like a non-controversial, like this isn't one of those years where I feel like there's a lot of clear, obvious choices. So yeah. Mixel Flicks asking, yeah, I am going to vote for Alex Len for most improved player. Ali, I love this Lakers season so much. Heart, let's go. This has been, I can say, probably my favorite season I've covered out of the 5. I would say that first season is up there because it was my first season covering the Lakers. It was also like coming out of COVID, so we were back to covering basketball again. They had a title defense. Didn't end in a great way, losing to Phoenix and AD getting injured, but that was a really fun season. But this one, it's been I would say like a cleaner process, and no, there's been a little bit of drama, but like not really. This has been the most drama-free Lakers season in a while. Of course, like drama with the trades or like AD does the ESPN interview. Like there's been like little things, but not like drama like the Russ situation or whatever. So, this has been a really fun season. Jay says AR has to be on the all-time NBA undrafted top 100. I mean, he's got to be in like, he's getting into like the top 20. I'd have to really like think about it and break it down, but he's going to be up there on that list. Yo Jovan with Luka dragging and Braun banged up. Do you think AR takes more of a lead in the playoffs? I think it's going to be circumstantial. I know that we like to, and I'm not saying you do this, but like, I think we like to have the clear hierarchy of like 1, 2, 3. I think it can change in a series. It could change in a particular game. It could depend on how a player is defending, or maybe, maybe a team has like 3 good defenders and then that third defender gets in foul trouble and they have to slot someone else on Austin. And then all of a sudden it's like spam Austin. Like Austin has this major mismatch that we need to keep going to. So I think it really just depends on the context of like how LeBron and Luka are looking, the style of defense that they're facing, like the strengths and weaknesses of that matchup and where Austin fits into that. But I think he's going to have a big role in a big part regardless. Like he has been right there with Luka and LeBron in terms of production and importance and value. I think the other thing that's like kind of flown under the radar a bit with him is I think the defense has been better and he's often getting the toughest perimeter assignments and like having to guard point guards. And I think he's been holding up much better than he did earlier in the season. And that's also with dealing with a bigger workload offensively. So I think Austin's been playing at an incredible level. Had a bit of an off night tonight by his standards, which shows you how high his standards are. But even within that, I don't think he played like poorly tonight or struggled with their length as much as maybe he would have like earlier in the season. So I think he's going to be a big part. I think Luka is going to be the primary ball handler and the highest usage guy. And I think there's an element of like with LeBron, especially in crunch time or big moments of games, like LeBron is going to be involved because he's LeBron. And like for 22 years, his team's best option has always been ball in LeBron's hands, let him cook, let him do something. So I still think that, like, if you want to create a hierarchy, I still think Austin's third, and that's no shade at him. And like, again, you could argue there's been stretches recently where he's outplayed those guys. He has had the ball more than those guys. But when it comes to like money time, I still think Luka is Luka, LeBron is LeBron. And like, I have a hard time seeing those guys being less involved offensively. Now, again, I think there are circumstances or situations where that could be the case, but I think on average, if we're like looking at just like general usage and like game to game or series to series, I think it'll probably slot Luka, LeBron, Austin, maybe Luka, Austin, LeBron, but if again, but I would almost like, I think Luka is going to be number one. And I think LeBron is probably going to be number two. It does seem like they're shifting him a little bit more off ball. So like maybe that lowers his usage a little bit. But I still think when it comes down to it, it's primarily going to be Luka and LeBron. But it's a good problem to have. Glenn, Jovan not voting for any Celtics player. I think Tatum's going to be on my MVP ballot, but as of now, I probably would put him fourth. So other than that, I don't think, and he'll be first team All NBA, but outside of that, I don't think they're going to be any other Celtics on my ballots. Tentative, like, we'll see. Eeg, thank you for the super chat. What's that blocked shots tab under? I may be blind. Also, who do you like for DPOY? Dre, Mobley, Draymond been insane lately. This one's really tough. And so I had a vote in 2023, and I will say I was on the right side of history because I voted for Jokic over Embiid. That was the year Embiid won. And I think I came out on the right side of that because that was the year Jokic won the title. And I know Embiid had a really good season, but I still felt like Jokic was the MVP and the better player. But that was a tough year for Defensive Player of the Year because I entered it thinking I was going to vote Brook Lopez. Then I had a stretch there where I was going to go Triple J. Then I actually ended up going Mobley, who finished third that year behind Triple J and Lopez. For me, Triple J, it was just, he was too foul prone and it impacted his minutes. And like he was averaging, I think, like 26 minutes per game that year. And it was partly because Memphis plays these deep rotations and limits their guys' minutes, but it was also partly because he was in foul trouble so much. And I just felt like that was like fouling and being in foul trouble and having your minutes limited is a detriment that, like, even if most of the advanced metrics favored Triple J, I felt like Mobley did a lot of what he did, and maybe like the raw numbers weren't as good, but he was, I think, better like switching onto wings and more of like a perimeter defender. So that was a really tough one though. I also considered Draymond Green. Lopez, I think it was mainly just because of his lack of defensive versatility that I didn't vote for him. I voted for him third. I went Mobley, Triple J, Lopez. But this year's tough. I think I am going to vote for Draymond or Mobley. I think those are the top two candidates, but I want to dive more into the film, more into the numbers. I probably tentatively am leaning a little bit more Draymond, but I think it's close between those two. Denny asks, how many do you vote for at each award? It depends on the award, and most are 3. MVP is the only one that's 5, and then you have the All NBA first team, second team, third team. Those are all 5. Rookie first team and second team. Those are each 5. Defensive first team and second team. Those are both 5. Then Coach of the Year, Rookie, Most Improved, Sixth Man. Those are all 3, and then MVP is 5. L.A. asks if Austin can sneak into the third team. He's going to get consideration. I think that the one, it's kind of nuts because like Luka in a lot of advanced metrics is, I think in EPM, which is estimated plus minus, he's like third. in the league behind Jokic and Shea. So that just shows you like the type of impact he's had this season. Britton, what did you think of the Detroit Minnesota scuffle the other day? And have you thought more about wider league coverage videos or channel go late night gang? Thank you for the super chat. I was not surprised. Like anytime I see Ron Holland or Isaiah Stewart in anything, it's like it's to be expected. They're the modern. I think Simmons has been comparing Holland to Ron Artest. I like that. And then Stewart is like, I don't even know. He's like Ben Wallace mixed with like Bill Laimbeer and or Rick Mahorn. He's a throwback player. So he's been obviously in a lot of scuffles. I thought obviously like Nas, I guess, escalated it, but it seemed like it had been building. I don't think they've announced the punishments yet, but I think it's going to be serious. I think there's going to be some serious, like, I mean, that spilled into the stands. It was right on the fans. Didn't get as ugly as it potentially could have, but like, I think based on their fear of that there will be some harsh punishments. But I thought it was fun. I personally, I'm pro fighting. Those of you who know my basketball style might not be surprised by that, but I'm typically pro hard fouls within reason of not like injuring a play, like not doing what Amari did to Andrew Bogut and dislocating his elbow and like ruining his career or altering it. Like that's a different thing. I think when guys are airborne, you got to be careful. But in general, I like an elbow, a hard foul, a little scuffle. I wish guys would fight more, honestly. I wish it was kind of more like hockey and they would just let them duke it out for a little bit. But yeah, I'm pro fighting. And I have thought about wider league coverage. I think, to be honest, like my biggest thing is just right now I'm so, because like even aside from this, like my coverage at The Athletic is Lakers only, that I think it makes it a little bit easier in that sense, obviously, to just cover Lakers on here. And right now, that's my priority. I am open to doing, like I talked about, if the Lakers get knocked out of the playoffs, doing some, let's say they lose in the conference finals, like doing post-game reactions after the finals. And we could talk about game 1 and 2 and 3 and talk about what happened, but also talk about it through a Lakers lens of like, I think a big thing is playoff lessons and like what you learn from there's always kind of trends for like the following season in terms of what's working, what's not, how a team is going to try and build like roster construction, all that stuff. So I think that's going to be something I'm interested in, but that would be post whenever the Lakers get knocked out. If they get knocked out, maybe they win the title and I just cover that through June. Right. So that is something on my radar. It's probably more of a post-season, whenever the Lakers season ends, though, would be like dabbling with it and then seeing how you guys like it, seeing if it reaches maybe a different audience, and then kind of figuring out, is that like a separate channel or is it just kind of what I'm still kind of processing that. So I have a lot of stuff in the works, though. I've talked about I'm currently working on a redesign that's hopefully going to be done by the end of the month, and then have memberships I'm working on, which I'll probably do some polling to see what you guys think about it, but working through that. And then once I have the rebrand, I will start with the merch, because I don't want to do merch on outdated branding or visuals or whatnot. So it's a little bit of a peek behind the scenes there. Sam, finals matchup prediction, Lakers Celtics with the fingers crossed emoji. From the beginning of the season, I have said Thunder Celtics, but if I think that the Lakers again are my number 2 team in the West, and I think I would not be surprised if Lakers went to the finals and won the title. So I haven't gotten fully there to making that prediction, but I am trending that way. And honestly, if they went to Oklahoma City and like beat the Thunder twice, and the Thunder tried in both games, and it was just like the Lakers have some advantages in here, or maybe they beat them, they split, and it's like both games are close, or maybe Lakers win one game by double digits, lose another game in crunch time, like I'll probably shift my opinion. So I'm very, very open-minded with these things. But like, as of now, I still, I think like, there is something to OKC being as consistent as they've been. They basically have played well all season. They really have not gone through like rough patches, like, maybe a couple bumps in the road, but they also have had, I think, some, like, they have a younger team. I think a bit of a healthier team, a more energetic team right now. That's another factor, but I'm open to being wrong on that. And I also think if the Lakers could get to the conference finals and they're playing OKC on the other side, I think I've talked about this before. If you get past a couple rounds with this group, I think their confidence is going to be through the roof. And you get Luka and LeBron a chance to get back to the finals, like that's going to be a really tough team to beat. So I almost think it's like OKC would almost have to beat them in like the second round, maybe to like, I would say this, I would favor OKC more earlier in a potential Lakers playoff, like in the second round more so than like in the third round. I think if they get to the third round, Lakers, I might at that point shift it more toward like the Lakers winning. So we'll see. But objectively, I would say right now I still have OKC Boston, but I'm open to being wrong. And I think if I had to pick, let's say this, if I had to change one of those things, I'll say this. I think the Lakers have a better chance of beating OKC than Cleveland has of beating Boston. And that might be a little bit of a hot take, but I think Boston is going to not have like an easy time with Cleveland, but like I think they're decidedly going to win that series. Whereas I think Lakers have a like that's probably closer to 50-50 against OKC. So I hope that answers that. Another super chat from Philip. Any word on Kleba? No, but we are supposed to get word hopefully this week. So it probably will be something I ask about Wednesday at practice. Colby S30, the Halt Jovan. Then I think this is in reference to me saying I was going to go 5 to 10 more minutes. But yeah, so I went a little bit over, about 15. So I'm going to wrap here though, because I still have more work to do tonight. And exciting news for those of you who have not seen it yet. I am podcasting with Jason Timpf tomorrow. He'll be on the show to talk about Lakers Rockets, talk about the rest of the season, and I think have some playoff matchup conversations. So we will be doing a mailbag portion toward the end of the show. So I posted a mailbag prompt. I'm also doing a mailbag on Wednesday. So if you guys are interested in asking a question and having it answered, drop it in there. I already have like 30 plus questions, so I won't be able to get to all of them, but I will try to get to as many as possible. But that'll do it for tonight's show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of Buha's Block with Jason Timpf of Hoops Tonight and The Volume. So be on the lookout for that. I think it'll be a fun one. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Appreciate you all. And I'll talk to you all very soon.